Good day everyone, I am Maria Christine C. Duero together with Miss Anamarie Ibrano, and for this video we're going to talk about sexual orientation. Inside sexual orientation are the subtopics: sexual identity, struggles for sexual identity, heterosexism tool on students and adults, school that value sexual diversity. So without further ado, let me first discuss about sexual orientation and its difference from gender identity. What is sexual orientation? Sexual orientation is about who you are attracted to and want to have relationships with. Sexual orientations includes gay, lesbian, straight, bisexual, and asexual. Sexual orientation is different from gender identity. Sexual orientation is about who you're attracted to and who you feel drawn to romantically, emotionally, and sexually. It's different from gender identity. Gender identity isn't about who you're attracted to, but about who you are: male, female, genderqueer, or etc. This means that being transgender isn't the same thing as being gay, lesbian, or bisexual. Again, sexual orientation is about who you want to be with. Gender identity is about who you are: male, female, or somewhere in between. There are a bunch of identities associated with sexual orientation. People who are attracted to different gender, for example, women who are attracted to men, or men who are attracted to women, often call themselves straight or heterosexual. People who are attracted to people of the same gender often call themselves gay or homosexual. Gay women may prefer the term lesbian. People who are attracted to both men and women often call themselves bisexual. People whose attractions span across many different gender identities, male, female, transgender, genderqueer, intersex, etc., may call themselves pansexual or queer. People who are unsure about their sexual orientation may call themselves questioning or curious. People who don't experience any sexual attraction for anyone often call themselves asexual. Cisgender refers to a person who identifies with the gender he or she was assigned at birth. Transgender persons have a psychological sense of being of the gender, male or female, that does not match their genetic sex. For example, a biological woman identifies herself as a man or vice versa. Self-identity. Our sexual identity is based on sexual attraction, related behaviors, and a connection with others with the same orientation. It is about how people decide to identify themselves. Some people might don't like the idea of levels at all. Other people feel comfortable with certain levels, and others are not. It's up to us to decide how we want to level ourselves. Struggles for sexual equity. Until World War II, most gays and lesbians hide their sexual identities, often marrying someone of the opposite sex, having children, and living as heterosexuals. State had laws that criminalized homosexuality, allowing gays to be arrested in their homes as well as public places. Gays and lesbians were often not allowed to teach because parents and school leaders believed that they would have a negative impact on children and youth. When Alfred Kinsey released his books on male sexuality in 1948 and female sexuality in 1953, it was affirming to many gays and lesbians as they realized they were not the only ones whose sexual orientation did not match societal expectations. Fight for sexual equity. The Lavender Scare. This policy was based on the unfounded fear that gay men and lesbians pose a threat to national security because they were vulnerable to blackmail and were considered to have weak moral characters. Purging homosexuals from the government, lesbians and gays are being dismissed from the military. Homosexual demands for justice but ignored by most of the population. Civil rights groups did not intervene to support gays and lesbians who were losing their jobs or being harassed. To support each other and their struggles for acceptance and equity in society, gays and lesbians began organizing. One of their goals was to eliminate the pathologically diagnosis that was prevalent in the dominant culture. Movements for gay rights. Gay rights movement, also called homosexual rights movement or gay liberation movement, is a civil rights movement that advocates equal rights for gay men, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender persons. Seek to eliminate sodomy laws bearing homosexual acts between consenting adults, and calls for an end to discrimination against gay men, lesbians, and transgender persons in employment, credit, housing, public accommodations, and other areas of life.
Heterosexism toll on students and adults. Heterosexism is the fear of aversion to LGBTQ youth and adults has historically resulted in laws that prevented them from openly acknowledging their sexual orientation or gender identity. State laws have prevented them from being together, marrying, and adopting children. They have been the victims of hate crimes and the target of bullying and discrimination from their early school days and sometimes in their own homes. The way they have been treated in society has affected their self-esteem, participation in school, academic achievement, and college attendance. A great deal of progress has been made over the past 2 decades to overturn heterosexist laws, but much work is left to eliminate the prejudice and discrimination that prevents LGBTQ youth from participating equally in the education process. And now I'm going to discuss who was the target of heterosexism. But before that, in the past, heterosexuality was so highly valued that laws were written to prohibit any other sexual behavior or identity. When the Supreme Court ruled in Lawrence, 2003 said that all sodomy laws were unconstitutional, and 13 states still had them on their books according to 2010. Many regions of the country do not have legislation or policies to prevent discrimination against LGBTQ persons. And firstly, LGBTQ people. LGBTQ people are victimized by hate crimes within 20% of the cases reported to the FBI, second only to hate crimes against African American, according to Federal Bureau of Investigation 2014. Second, LGBTQ youth. LGBT youth may experience invisibility and isolation in their homes, communities, and schools, according to Savage and Harley 2009. They do not see positive images of LGBTQ people in their school. The school and local library may not have books or other information on LGBTQ issue. They learn that they are not normal and are often hated by others. Lastly, LGBTQ teacher. LGBTQ teachers have always been expected to be positive role models for students, which require them to be very careful about their social activities and relationships. Single teachers are often warned about sharing residence with adults of the same sex or of the opposite sex. If they are not married, such behavior could be declared immoral and could lead to dismissal from a job, especially teaching. Because of that, many gay and lesbian educators separate their personal and professional lives for fear of losing their jobs. They worry that they might be accused of molestation or touching students inappropriately, charged with recruiting their student into being homosexual or caught in homosexual liaison. Schools that value sexual diversity. We all knew that schools have a very important role in promoting a nation culture and its value. Educators accomplish this task through the formal curriculum that they teach and through the informal curriculum of value-laden rules that guide the daily activities of a classroom and the school. Both the formal and informal curricula usually reinforce the values of the dominant culture, which is white, middle class, heterosexual, English-speaking, able-bodied, and Christian. And as a teacher, you may receive resistance from some parents and schools officials once you begin to recognize the sexual diversity of students in a positive and accepting way, or you begin to incorporate content about LGBTQ people in the curriculum. And you should know that your students are likely to be at a very different places in terms of acceptance of sexual diversity, with the existence of these types of obstacle to reflecting sexual diversity in the classroom. Why should teacher tackle this project? Longtime educator Elizabeth G. Mayer, 2010, identifies 4 reasons for taking on this challenge. First, student safety. Bullying and harassment are often gendered in nature, directed at students who are gay or perceived to be gay and students who do not conform to the heterosexual behavioral expectation associated with their biological sex, including boys who are effeminate and girls who are tomboys. In a school that values sexual diversity, students would respect and support each other regardless of their sexual identities. Second, physical and emotional health. LGBTQ students often feel ostracized and isolated in school because teachers and other students do not see them as normal. They may be hiding their sexual identity because they fear possible harassment. As a result of their being open about their sexual identity, consequently, they are more likely than their heterosexual peers to engage in high-risk sexual behavior or drug and alcohol abuse. Third, diversity and equity. Most schools now have incorporated diversity into the curriculum. That diversity does not always include sexual identity, where LGBTQ students feel excluded from textbook, from the curriculum, and class discussion. Students who have to worry about the hostile environment of a school may disengage by cutting classes and skipping school acts that have a negative impact on their academic achievement. Dropout rates for LGBT students are also higher than those of their peers. Those were the 4 challenges in sexual diversity in the classroom. Querying in the curriculum. Educators incorporate factual information on sexual identity in the curriculum. The focus is not on what causes LGBTQ identity but on the factors that contribute to heterosexism and homophobia that make it so difficult for people who are LGBTQ to cope with their sexual identity. LGBTQ students should be able to see themselves not only in textbook but in the topics that are discussed. Sexual identity should not be a taboo subject in the classroom. Teachers should be able to help students develop greater awareness and understanding of it when the topic arises. Finding themselves in the curriculum helps to increase the self-esteem and feeling of affirmation of LGBTQ students, according to Savage and Harley, 2009. Middle school and secondary curriculum. Social studies could explore the privilege of heterosexuality in society and include a study of the history of LGBT people and their struggle for equality. Social studies also provide the opportunity to discuss current events at the local, state, and national levels related to LGBTQ issues such as same-sex marriage, anti-gay laws, and adaptation by gays and lesbians. Language, arts, and literature courses, including books and short stories by gay and lesbian authors as well as authors of color. As the teacher, you should not be afraid to identify the sexual identity of the author and talk about how it may have influenced the other author writings. The contribution of gays and lesbians to society could be highlighted in these courses as well as in courses in arts, music, the science, and physical education. Teacher of Mathematics and Science. These courses find opportunities to include LGBTQ people in their curriculum. For example, the study of graph, charts, and statistics could report data related to the experience of LGBTQ students in school or society. Word problems could be checked for their heteronormativity, which is the assumption that heterosexuality is normal and any other identity is abnormal. Biology could address chromosomal and hormonal influence on embryonic development as well as how biology is related to gender, according to Mayer, 2010. Early childhood and elementary curriculum. Querying the curriculum is not limited to middle and secondary school. Two areas in which related issue could be introduced in early childhood and elementary education are gender role expectation and families, according to Mayer, 2010. Units on families are common at this level and gender roles are taught and reinforced through the informal curriculum of preschool and elementary school. Gender identity becomes important very early in life. Young children learn very quickly the right clothes to wear and the appropriate toys and games to play. Based on their biological sex sex preschool classrooms often have a boys' corner separate from the girls' corner, and the two groups are not generally encouraged to integrate their play. In fact, children may be redirected if they select a toy, book, or game that is more directly identified with the opposite sex. Overall, teacher can provide an environment for critically examining the dominant cultural norms that degenerate LGBTQ people. They can encourage an understanding of sexual diversity through the presentation of facts, facilitation of discussion, and also staging of democratic debates in which everyone's opinion is respected. When homophobic name-calling by students occur, teacher could follow up with a teachable moment to provide facts and correct myths about LGBTQ people. Safe school policies. Parents and communities believe that schools should be safe for students. The overall goal for our school should be to treat all students with equal respect and dignity, according to Beagle 2010. That's all. The topic that we've been discussed is under the sexual orientation, which is heterosexism toll on students and adults, school that values sexual diversity. I hope you gain something about the topic that we've been discussed, and as a future teacher, let it be that those were the guides that how we can cope up the problems that we might face when it comes to sexual diversity. That's all. Thank you.